The red carpet stretched like a river of crimson fire, and Elise Harper stood at its edge, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the paparazzi's shouts. She was 32, Hollywood's golden girl, her name synonymous with blockbuster romances and tear-jerking dramas. But tonight, the weight of her secret felt heavier than any Oscar statuette. By midnight, she'd either be free or ruined. Elise adjusted her emerald gown, its silk hugging her curves like a lover's whisper, and scanned the crowd. Fans screamed her name, their signs glittering under the Los Angeles sky. She smiled. Perfect, practiced, the mask she'd worn for a decade. But her eyes searched for one face, Nora Chun, the journalist who'd unraveled her soul in a single interview 6 months ago. Nora, with her sharp questions and softer smiles, had seen through Elise's polished facade. And now, Elise was ready to risk everything. The Dolby Theater loomed, its golden lights a beacon of dreams and dread. Elise had spent years crafting her image. The all-American sweetheart, the leading lady who kissed leading men on screen and dodged rumors off it. Her agent, Marcus, had warned her since her first big break at 22. Hollywood loves you straight. Don't give them a reason to stop. So, she'd hidden her truth, dated men for show, and buried her heart in late-night confessions to her journal. But Nora had changed everything. It started innocently, a profile piece for Vogue. Nora, 29, with her cropped black hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through lies, had sat across from Elise in a quiet Venice Beach cafe. "What's the one thing you've never told anyone?" Nora had asked, pen poised, her voice gentle but relentless. Elise had laughed it off, but that night, alone in her Malibu mansion, she'd written Nora's name in her journal, the ink trembling under her fingers. They'd met again and again under the guise of follow-ups. Coffee turned to wine, questions turned to confessions, and soon Elise was falling hard. Now, as she stepped onto the carpet, cameras flashing like a storm, Elise felt Nora's absence like a missing limb. Nora had promised to be here, covering the Oscars for the LA Times. Elise's acceptance speech, if she won Best Actress, was her chance to tell the world she was a lesbian, that she loved Nora, that she was done hiding. But the risk was cataclysmic. Her fans adored her as their fantasy girlfriend. Her studio contracts demanded marketable heterosexuality. Coming out could end her career. "Elise, over here!" A photographer's shout snapped her back. She posed, chin high, smile flawless, but her mind raced. What if Nora didn't show? What if the world turned on her? What if love wasn't enough? Inside the theater, the air buzzed with anticipation. Elise took her seat, her co-star Ryan Blake beside her, his easy grin a reminder of the fake romance they'd played for the tabloids. "You okay, Ellie?" he whispered, sensing her tension. She nodded, but her hands trembled in her lap. The ceremony began, music swelling, and Elise's category loomed closer. She scanned the press balcony, searching for Nora's familiar silhouette. Backstage, Nora was fighting her own battle. Her editor had nearly pulled her from the assignment, citing a conflict of interest after catching wind of her closeness with Elise. Nora had argued, her voice steady but her heart racing, that she was the best for the job. She'd made it, but security was tight, and her press pass felt like a fragile lifeline. She clutched her notebook, her notes scribbled with questions she'd never ask. How do you love someone when the world won't let you? Elise's category was announced. Her name echoed through the theater, her face filling the screens. Clips of her performance in Shades of Dawn played, a raw, heartbreaking role as a widow finding hope. The audience applauded, but Elise barely heard it. Her eyes found Nora at last, standing in the balcony, her expression a mix of pride and fear. Elise's heart surged. This was it. The presenter opened the envelope. And the Oscar goes to Elise Harper. The room erupted. Elise stood, legs unsteady, and made her way to the stage. The statuette was cold in her hands, heavier than she'd imagined. She faced the crowd, cameras zooming in, millions watching worldwide. Her speech was memorized, but the words she'd planned, the truth, burned in her throat. "Thank you," she began, voice steady despite the storm inside. This means everything, but there's something I need to say. The audience leaned forward, sensing a shift. Elisa's eyes locked on Nora's. I've spent my life playing roles on screen and off, but tonight I'm done hiding. I'm a lesbian, and I'm in love with an incredible woman named Nora Chen. The theater went silent. Then, a single clap broke the stillness, followed by another, until applause thundered. But Elise only saw Nora, tears streaming down her face, nodding from the balcony. The world was watching, and Elise had just changed everything. The applause faded, but the weight of Elise's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. She stood frozen on the Dolby Theater stage, the Oscar clutched tightly, her heart a drumbeat echoing Nora's name. The cameras zoomed closer, capturing every flicker of her expression, broadcasting her truth to millions. Backstage, chaos erupted. Elisa's agent, Marcus, paced furiously, his phone already buzzing with calls from studio execs. You just lit a match in a room full of dynamite, he hissed as she stepped off stage, her gown trailing like a comet's tail. Elise ignored him, her eyes searching for Nora. The press room was a frenzy, reporters shouting questions, flashbulbs blinding. Elise, are you serious? Who's Nora Chen? What does this mean for your career? She pushed through, her only thought to find Nora. They'd planned this moment in stolen whispers, late-night calls, and quiet mornings in Nora's tiny Silver Lake apartment. But the reality was sharper, more terrifying. Elise had just burned her carefully crafted image to the ground, and the fallout was already beginning. Nora was waiting in a dimly lit hallway, her press pass dangling, her face pale but fierce. You did it, she whispered, pulling Elise into a quick, desperate embrace. Their lips brushed, a fleeting promise, before security ushered them apart. They're going to eat you alive, Nora said, her voice trembling but resolute. But I'm here. Elise nodded, her throat tight. I know. They'd known the risks. Tabloid vultures, studio backlash, fans turning on her. But standing there, Nora's hand grazing hers, Elise felt a flicker of hope. She'd chosen love over fear, and that had to mean something. The after-party at the governor's ball was a glittering cage. Elise mingled, her smile a shield, as industry titans whispered behind champagne flutes. Ryan Blake, her co-star, stayed close, his loyalty unwavering. You're braver than I'll ever be, he murmured, handing her a drink. But heads up, the suits are circling. Sure enough, Elise spotted her studio head, Vivian Cross, approaching, her expression a mask of calculated calm. Elise, darling, Vivian said, her voice syrupy but sharp. That was bold. But we need to talk damage control. The studio's invested millions in your next project. Elisa's stomach churned. Her upcoming film, a romantic comedy, was built on her girl-next-door appeal. Coming out wasn't just personal, it was a financial earthquake. I'm not apologizing, Elise said, her voice steady. Vivian's smile tightened. We'll see how the box office feels about that. Across the room, Nora was cornered by her editor, Greg, who looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. You're too close to this, Chen, he said, jabbing a finger. You're supposed to report the story, not be it. Nora's jaw clenched. She'd fought for years to prove herself in a cutthroat industry, her bylines hard-earned. Being with Elise could cost her credibility, maybe her job. But she'd known that when she'd fallen for Elise's quiet strength, her unguarded laughter in those rare moments they stole together. Let me do my job, Nora said, her voice low but firm. I'll write the truth. Greg snorted but backed off, muttering about deadlines. Nora's phone buzzed. Texts from colleagues, some supportive, others snide. The internet was already ablaze. Elise Harper trends, memes, think pieces, and hate. She glanced at Elise, radiant but fragile across the room, and knew they were in this together. Later, in the quiet of Elise's hotel suite, they collapsed onto the couch, the city's lights sprawling below. Elise kicked off her heels, her gown pooling around her. I didn't expect it to feel like this, she admitted, her voice raw. Free, but terrifying. Nora took her hand, her fingers warm and steady. "You're not alone," she said. "Whatever happens, we face it together." But the world wasn't done with them. By morning, Elise's phone was flooded. Her publicist in a panic, sponsors pulling out, and a vicious op-ed calling her Hollywood's latest scandal. Nora's article, a raw, honest piece about Elise's courage, was buried under a flood of clickbait. Yet, amid the noise, messages poured in from fans. Young women, queer teens, people who saw themselves in Elise's truth. "You gave me hope," one read, and Elise's eyes filled with tears. They had one day before the media storm hit full force. Elise and Nora drove to the Santa Monica Pier, seeking a moment of normalcy. The ocean roared, the Ferris wheel spun, and for a few hours, they were just two women in love, sharing cotton candy and stolen kisses. But Elise knew the battle was just beginning. Hollywood didn't forgive easily, and she'd just rewritten her story in a way no one could ignore. The Santa Monica Pier faded behind them as Elise drove her convertible along the Pacific Coast Highway, the wind tangling her hair. Nora sat beside her, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook, her silence a comfort Elise clung to. But the weight of the world was creeping back, their phones buzzing with notifications neither could ignore. By Monday, the media storm was a hurricane. Elise's coming out dominated headlines, from Variety's cautious praise to tabloids' screaming betrayal. Elise Harper's career suicide? One rag blared. Her Instagram was a war zone. Heart emojis from supporters drowned out by venomous comments. "You lied to us." Unfollowed. Her follower count dropped by thousands overnight. Elise stared at the numbers, her chest tight, until Nora gently closed her laptop. "They don't know you," Nora said, her voice fierce. "Not like I do." But the industry's reaction was colder. Marcus called with grim news. 2 endorsement deals were under review, and the studio was reassessing her rom-com role. "They're talking recasting Elise," he said, his voice heavy. "They think you're not relatable anymore." Elise laughed bitterly. Relatable. She'd spent a decade being what everyone wanted, America's sweetheart, the girl who loved safe, scripted men. Now her truth was a liability. Nora faced her own fallout. Her editor, Greg, had spiked her feature on Elise, calling it too personal. Instead, he assigned her a fluff piece on Oscar fashion. "You're compromised, Chen," he'd said. Nora fumed but complied, knowing a wrong move could end her career. Still, she spent nights drafting a blog post on her own, a defense of Elise's courage, knowing it might never see print. They found solace in small rebellions. Elise cooked dinner in her Malibu kitchen, Nora teasing her for burning the pasta. They danced to old jazz records, their laughter drowning out the world. But reality intruded. A leaked email from a studio exec called Elise's announcement a publicity stunt gone wrong. Fans picketed outside her agency, some with signs reading, "We still love you," others with slurs. Elise's mother, a retired teacher from Ohio, called, her voice trembling. "I'm proud, honey. But be careful. People can be cruel." The cruelty came fast. A conservative talk show host dissected Elise's speech, calling her deceptive for hiding her identity. "She sold us a lie," he sneered, and clips went viral. Elise watched, her stomach churning, as strangers debated her life. Nora, ever the journalist, tracked the narrative, noting how quickly support turned to skepticism. "They're scared of your power," she told Elise. "You're rewriting their rules." A week later, Elise was summoned to a studio meeting. The boardroom was sterile, all glass and sharp angles, like the executive's smiles. Vivian Cross led the charge. "We're not saying you can't be yourself," she said, the word dripping with disdain. "But we need a strategy, a public apology, maybe a staged relationship to smooth things over." Elise's blood boiled. "I'm not going back in the closet," she said, her voice cutting through the room. Vivian leaned forward. "Then you're gambling with your future." Nora, meanwhile, was fighting her own war. A rival reporter, jealous of her scoop, had dug into her past, outing her as queer on a gossip site. Elise Harper's lover. The journalist who knew too much. The headline read. Nora's colleagues whispered, her inbox filled with hate. She wanted to scream, to write a scathing exposé, but she focused on Elise instead. "We're stronger than this," she said, holding Elise's hand as they watched the sunset from a cliffside overlook. The turning point came unexpectedly. A young fan, 17-year-old Mia from Chicago, posted a video online, tearfully thanking Elise for giving her the courage to come out to her parents. The video spread, sparking a hashtag, Elise Inspires. Messages flooded in, queer kids, parents, even celebrities sharing their stories. Elise read them through tears, Nora at her side. "You're changing lives," Nora whispered. Elise nodded, but the fear lingered. Could she survive Hollywood's wrath? They decided to fight back. Elise agreed to an exclusive interview with a queer-friendly outlet, Out Magazine, with Nora as the writer. It was a risk. Nora's bias was obvious, but it was their chance to tell their story. As they prepared, Elise's past resurfaced. Old photos, fake boyfriends, moments she'd buried. Nora listened, her pen steady, as Elise bared her soul. The interview was raw, real, and dangerous, but it was theirs. The Out Magazine interview was a tightrope. Elise sat in a cozy studio, the Los Angeles skyline glittering through the window, as Nora asked questions that cut deeper than any red carpet reporters. What was the hardest part of hiding? Nora's voice was soft, but her eyes demanded truth. Elise's answer, about the loneliness, the fake dates, the fear of losing everything, poured out, raw and unfiltered. Nora's pen moved furiously, capturing every word, her own heart breaking for the woman she loved. The piece went live a week later, titled Elise Harper, The Courage to be Seen. It was a love letter to authenticity, weaving Elise's story with Nora's sharp, empathetic prose. Social media exploded. Elise Inspires trended again, alongside Nora and Elise. Fans shared screenshots of Elise's words. "I hid because I thought I had to, but love is worth more than any role." For every hateful comment, there were 10 messages of support. Queer teens thanking Elise, allies praising her bravery. But the industry wasn't as kind. Vivian Cross called an emergency meeting. "This interview," she said, slamming a tablet on the table, "is a problem. You're alienating half your audience." Elise stood her ground. "I'm not here to play a part anymore. I'm here to tell the truth." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Truth doesn't pay for reshoots. We're pulling you from the rom-com unless you agree to a PR cleanup." Elise walked out, her heart pounding but her resolve unbroken. Nora faced her own reckoning. Greg, her editor, called her into his office. "You're off the entertainment beat," he said flatly. "You're too entangled with Harper." Nora's fists clenched. "I wrote the truth. Isn't that my job?" Greg shrugged. "Your job is to stay objective. You're not." Nora stormed out, her career teetering, but she refused to regret the piece. It was her love letter to Elise and to herself. The backlash grew uglier. A right-wing outlet published a hit piece, digging up Elise's old boyfriend photos and calling her a fraud. Paparazzi stalked their every move, snapping blurry shots of Elise and Nora grabbing coffee, turning mundane moments into scandals. Elise's Malibu home became a fortress. Security doubled after a threatening letter arrived. Nora moved in temporarily, her small apartment too exposed. They clung to each other, finding strength in late-night talks and quiet mornings. But the pressure was relentless. Hope came in waves. A queer filmmaker, Lena Torres, reached out, offering Elise a role in an indie drama about a lesbian couple navigating family rejection. "We need your voice," Lena said over Zoom, her sincerity a bomb. Elise hesitated, indies paid less, and the role was raw, exposing, but Nora urged her on. "This is who you are," she said, squeezing Elise's hand. "Show them." Elise accepted, diving into the script with a hunger she hadn't felt in years. The set was small, a far cry from blockbuster budgets, but the crew was family, many queer, all supportive. For the first time, Elise acted without a mask, her scenes electric with truth. Nora visited, watching from behind the camera, her pride palpable. "You're a revelation," she whispered during a break, and Elise kissed her, not caring who saw, but the world kept pushing back. A major sponsor dropped Elise, citing brand misalignment. Her social media team reported a dip in engagement, fans still reeling from her betrayal. At a low point, Elise found an old journal, pages filled with her fears of being outed. "I'm tired of hiding," she'd written years ago. Reading it now, with Nora asleep beside her, Elise felt a fire reignite. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every kid like Mia, whose video had sparked a movement. Nora, too, was rebuilding. She pitched a freelance series to a progressive outlet, chronicling queer stories in Hollywood. Her first subject, Lena Torres, the filmmaker, giving Elise a chance. The pitch was accepted, and Nora threw herself into research, her passion undimmed by Greg's betrayal. She and Elise became a team, strategizing over coffee, dreaming of a future where they could live openly. As filming wrapped, Elise got a call from Ryan Blake. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice warm, "and I've got your back." He'd been lobbying the studio to keep her in the rom-com, arguing her talent was irreplaceable. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Elise hung up, tears in her eyes, and turned to Nora. "We're going to make it," she said, and for the first time, she believed it. Elise woke to the sound of waves crashing outside her Malibu home, Nora's arm draped across her waist. For a moment, the world felt still, just the two of them, safe in their cocoon. But the morning news shattered the peace. A major studio had publicly distanced itself from Elise, citing creative differences. The message was clear. Hollywood was punishing her. She scrolled through her phone, wincing at the headlines. Some praised her courage, but others were brutal, clickbait accusing her of destroying her legacy. Nora, brewing coffee, caught her expression. "Don't read that garbage," she said, sliding a mug into Elise's hands. "You're bigger than their lies." Elise managed a smile, but the fear gnawed. Her indie film was a lifeline, but it wouldn't pay the bills if her blockbuster career tanked. Nora's own career was fraying. Her freelance series gained traction, but her former colleagues at the LA Times kept their distance, wary of her scandal. She poured her energy into her work, interviewing queer actors and directors, each story a brick in the wall she was building against the industry's hypocrisy. But late at night, she admitted to Elise, "I'm scared I'll lose everything I fought for." Their love was their anchor. They stole moments, a hike in Griffith Park, a quiet dinner at a hole-in-the-wall taco joint, where they could be ordinary. But the paparazzi were relentless, their lenses catching every glance, every touch. One photo, of Elise laughing as Nora wiped salsa from her chin, went viral, captioned, "Hollywood's fallen star finds love." Some called it sweet. Others called it proof of Elise's downfall. The indie film, Breaking Tides, became Elise's refuge. The role Claire, a woman reconnecting with her estranged sister, mirrored her own journey of self-discovery. On set, she felt alive, unburdened by the expectations of blockbusters. Lena Torres, the director, pushed her to dig deep, and Elise delivered scenes that left the crew in tears. "This is your Oscar," Lena said after a particularly raw take. Elise laughed, but her heart swelled. Maybe this was enough. Nora's series, published online, started gaining buzz. Her profile on Lena was a hit, and readers clamored for more. She began shadowing Elise on set, weaving their love story into a broader narrative about queer visibility. But the exposure came at a cost. A troll doxed Nora's address, forcing her to tighten security. Elise, furious, wanted to hire a lawyer, but Nora stopped her. "We fight with our work," she said, her voice steady. "That's how we win." A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A major streaming platform, sensing the cultural shift, approached Elise about a limited series, a queer love story set in 1960s New York. The offer was modest but real, a chance to tell a story that mattered. Elise hesitated, knowing it would cement her as the lesbian actress. But Nora's eyes lit up. "This is your chance to redefine yourself," she said. Elise signed the contract, her hand shaking with possibility. The studio fight over the rom-com escalated. Ryan Blake's advocacy helped, but Vivian Cross remained unyielding. At a tense meeting, Vivian proposed a compromise. Elise could stay if she agreed to a neutral public image. No more flaunting her relationship. Elise's laugh was sharp. "I'm done pretending," she said, walking out. Ryan followed, promising to push harder. "You're not alone in this," he said, and Elise believed him. The Elise Inspires movement grew, with fan art, videos, and letters pouring in. A queer youth center in San Francisco invited Elise to speak, and she accepted, nervous but determined. Standing before a room of teens, she shared her story, her fear, her love, her hope. A girl in the back, eyes shining, asked, "How do you stay brave?" Elise looked at Nora, who'd come along, and said, "You find someone who believes in you, and you hold on tight." As they drove home, the city lights blurring past, Elise felt a shift. The world was still cruel, but it was also changing. She and Nora were part of that change, their love a beacon for others. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Elise felt like they could win. Not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. The San Francisco Youth Center talk lingered in Elise's heart like a melody. She and Nora drove back to Los Angeles, the highway stretching endlessly before them, their hands intertwined over the gearshift. But the world's applause was fleeting. By morning, a new wave of backlash hit, this time targeting Nora. A gossip blog published a smear, accusing Nora of exploiting Elise for clout. Anonymous sources, likely bitter colleagues, claimed she'd manipulated Elise into coming out for her own career gain. Nora laughed it off, but Elise saw the hurt in her eyes. "They don't get us," Nora said, tossing her phone aside. But the lies stung, and Elise felt a protective rage. She wanted to shield Nora, to scream at the world, but Nora was resolute. "We keep going," she said, kissing Elise's forehead. "That's how we prove them wrong." The indie film wrapped, and early buzz was electric. Breaking Tide screened at a small festival, earning standing ovations. Critics called Elise's performance career-defining, her raw vulnerability a revelation. Lena Torres beamed, whispering to Elise, "You're unstoppable." For the first time in months, Elise felt like she was more than a headline. But the studio battle loomed. Vivian Cross sent a final ultimatum: agree to a rebranding campaign or lose the rom-com role. Elise refused, her voice steady. "I'm not a product. I'm a person." Nora's freelance series was picking up steam, each article a love letter to queer resilience. She profiled a trans stunt performer, a non-binary screenwriter, and a lesbian cinematographer, weaving their stories with her own. Readers connected, and her inbox filled with messages from aspiring journalists inspired by her courage. But the personal cost was high. Her old life, happy hours with colleagues, casual trust was gone. She and Elise were a unit now, their bond forged in fire, but the isolation was real. A new threat emerged. A conservative activist group launched a boycott of Elise's films, calling her a danger to traditional values. Petitions circulated, demanding her projects be shelved. Elise's team scrambled, but the damage was done. Her rom-com was officially on hold. Ryan Blake called, furious. "They're cowards," he said. "I'm pitching you for a new project. A thriller. You in?" Elise agreed, grateful for his loyalty, but the loss of the rom-com stung. It wasn't just a role. It was proof she could still play the game. Nora, meanwhile, faced a crossroads. A major outlet offered her a staff position in New York, a dream job with stability, but it meant leaving Elise, at least temporarily. She agonized, her notebook filled with pros and cons. Elise found her staring at the list one night, her face drawn. "You should take it," Elise said, her voice breaking. "It's what you've worked for." Nora shook her head. "You're what I've worked for. Us." They cried, holding each other, knowing the choice would define their future. The streaming series offer became a lifeline. Elise threw herself into prep, reading scripts about two women fighting for love in a repressive era. The role felt like a mirror, her own fight, her own love. Nora helped with research, digging into historical queer stories, her journalist's instincts sharpening the narrative. They worked late, papers strewn across Elise's dining table, their laughter cutting through the stress. "We're building something real," Nora said, and Elise believed her. The boycott gained traction, but so did Elise Inspires. A viral video of a queer teen thanking Elise for her courage got picked up by major networks. Celebrities, some out, some not, voiced support, and a few joined Lena's indie project as producers. Elise's phone buzzed with texts from old co-stars, offering quiet encouragement. The tide was turning, but slowly. One night, Elise and Nora attended a fundraiser for a queer youth charity. Elise spoke, her voice steady, about the kids who'd written to her, their stories of rejection and hope. The room was packed. Activists, actors, everyday people moved by her words. Nora stood in the back, tears in her eyes, her notebook untouched. For once, she wasn't reporting. She was living. As they left, hand in hand, a photographer snapped a shot that would become iconic. Elise and Nora, laughing under a streetlight, their love undeniable. The world was still watching, but for the first time, Elise didn't care. She was hers, and Nora was hers, and that was enough. The fundraiser photo went viral, a beacon of hope in a sea of hate. Elise and Nora framed it, hanging it in Elise's living room, a reminder of what they were fighting for. But the battle wasn't over. The boycott group escalated, targeting Elise's new streaming series with threats to protest its release. Social media churned with vitriol, and Elise's team warned her to lay low. "I'm done hiding," she told Marcus, her voice steel. He sighed but nodded, knowing she was immovable. Nora's New York job offer loomed. She had a week to decide, and the weight of it pressed on them both. One night, over takeout in Elise's kitchen, Nora admitted, "I want it, but I can't imagine leaving you." Elise's heart ached. She wanted Nora to soar, but the thought of distance terrified her. "We'll make it work," she said, squeezing Nora's hand. "Love doesn't quit." Nora smiled, but her eyes were uncertain. The streaming series, Love in Shadows, began filming in Los Angeles, a small mercy. Elise played Anna, a 1960s artist defying societal norms to love a journalist, eerily close to her own story. The set was a haven, filled with queer creatives who celebrated Elise's authenticity. Her co-star, a rising actress named Samira, brought a fiery energy, their chemistry electric. Nora visited often, her presence grounding Elise through grueling 14-hour shoots. But the outside world intruded. A tabloid leaked behind-the-scenes photos, twisting them into a narrative of on-set romance between Elise and Samira. The rumor spread, fueled by fans desperate for drama. Elise laughed it off, but Nora's jaw tightened. "They'll do anything to erase us," she said, scrolling through the lies. Elise pulled her close. "Let them try. You're my truth." The boycott group organized a rally outside the studio, their signs venomous. Elise watched from a window, her stomach churning. Lena Torres, the indie director, joined her, her voice calm. "They're loud, but they're small. Your fans, the real ones, are louder." Lena was right. Elise Inspires was now a global movement, with queer organizations hosting watch parties for breaking tides. Elise's indie film was gaining festival buzz, with talks of awards season. Nora's series on queer Hollywood was thriving, her latest piece, a profile of a gay costume designer, nominated for a journalism award. But the New York offer tugged at her. She and Elise spent a weekend in Big Sur, seeking clarity. Under a starlit sky, Nora confessed, "I'm scared I'll lose myself if I stay, but I'll lose you if I go." Elise held her, the ocean roaring below. "You won't lose me. We'll find a way." A breakthrough came when Ryan Blake's thriller pitch was greenlit. Elise was cast as a detective, a gritty role that leaned on her talent, not her image. The studio, a smaller outfit, embraced her authenticity, and Elise felt a spark of hope. Maybe Hollywood was changing. She celebrated with Nora at a quiet bar, their first public date in weeks. Paparazzi caught them, but this time, The headlines were kind. Elise Harper shines in love and courage. The streaming series wrapped its first season, and early cuts were stunning. Elise's performance was raw, her love scenes with Samira tender and real. At a cast screening, Nora squeezed her hand, tears in her eyes. "You're telling our story," she whispered. Elise nodded, her throat tight. This was bigger than them, it was for every queer kid who'd ever felt invisible. But the boycott group struck again, hacking Elise's social media to post hateful messages. Her team scrambled to regain control, but the damage was done. Fans were shaken, and Elise's confidence wavered. Nora, furious, wrote a blistering op-ed, calling out the industry's complicity in amplifying hate. It went viral, reigniting support for Elise. "You're my hero," Elise told her, half laughing, half crying. As Nora's decision deadline approached, they faced their fears head-on. Over coffee, Elise said, "Take the job. We'll do long distance. I believe in us." Nora nodded, tears falling. "I love you," she said, and they kissed, sealing a promise. The world was still watching, but Elise and Nora were ready to write their own ending. One of love, resilience, and truth. Nora's flight to New York was booked, and the countdown felt like a heartbeat. Elise drove her to LAX, the silence heavy, their hands clasped until the last moment. "We're not saying goodbye," Nora said, her voice cracking as she hugged Elise. "Just see you soon." Elise nodded, tears blurring her vision, and watched Nora disappear into the terminal, her heart aching but resolute. Back in Los Angeles, Elise threw herself into the thriller Dark Pulse. The role, Detective Lauren Cole, haunted but relentless, fit like a second skin. The set was gritty, the crew tight-knit, and the director, a queer woman named Jamie, championed Elise's vision. "You're not just playing her," Jamie said after a take. "You're living her." Elise smiled, but Nora's absence was a constant ache. They texted constantly, video calls bridging the distance, but it wasn't the same. Nora settled into New York, her new job at the Atlantic a whirlwind. Her beat, culture, and identity let her amplify queer voices, but the city's pace was relentless. She missed Elise's warmth, their quiet mornings. Her first article, a deep dive into queer representation in film, mentioned Elise's journey without naming her. Readers connected the dots, and the piece sparked debate. Nora's editor praised her, but warned, "Stay sharp, you're still under scrutiny." The boycott group didn't relent. They targeted Love in Shadows, leaking fake spoilers to paint it as propaganda. Elise's team fought back, releasing teasers that showcased the series' heart. The response was electric. Fans rallied, streaming platforms buzzed, and Elise Inspires trended again. But the hate lingered. A late-night talk show host mocked Elise, calling her Hollywood's woke experiment. Elise watched the clip, her jaw tight, until Ryan Blake called. "Screw him," Ryan said. "You're rewriting the game." Elise's indie film, Breaking Tides, hit the festival circuit, earning raves. At a Q&A in Toronto, a fan asked how she found the courage to come out. Elise paused, thinking of Nora's smile. "Someone saw me, really saw me, and I couldn't hide anymore," she said. The room erupted, and Nora, watching a live stream in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, cried. She texted Elise, "You're my hero too." The thriller shoot was grueling, but Elise thrived. Her scenes, chasing leads, confronting her character's demons, mirrored her own fight. Offset, she leaned on Ryan, who'd become a brother. He shared his own struggles, admitting he'd hidden parts of himself to fit Hollywood's mold. "You're making it easier for the rest of us," he said, and Elise felt the weight of her impact. Nora's New York life was thriving but lonely. She made friends, queer journalists, activists, but missed Elise's touch. They planned a visit, counting days like kids before Christmas. When Elise arrived, they fell into each other's arms at JFK, the world fading away. They spent a weekend exploring Brooklyn, stealing kisses in bookstores, pretending they were ordinary. But paparazzi found them, and a grainy photo hit the tabloids, Elise Harper's long-distance romance doomed? Nora laughed, but Elise saw the strain in her eyes. The streaming series dropped its trailer, and the response was seismic. Clips of Elise and Samira's chemistry lit up social media, with fans calling it revolutionary. The boycott group tried to derail it, but their noise was drowned out by love. Elise and Nora watched the trailer together via video call, Nora in New York, Elise in LA. "We did this," Nora said, her voice thick. Elise nodded, tears falling. "We're just getting started." A crisis loomed. The boycott group planned a major protest at the Love in Shadows premiere. Elise's team urged her to skip it, but she refused. "This is my story," she said. Nora flew back for the event, her presence a quiet strength. They strategized, leaning on Lena and Jamie for support. The premiere was their chance to show the world they wouldn't be silenced. As the date approached, Elise got a call from Mia, the Chicago teen whose video had sparked Elise Inspires. "I'm coming to the premiere," Mia said, her voice shaky but excited. "You changed my life." Elise's heart swelled. This wasn't just about her and Nora, it was about every kid who needed hope. They were ready to face the storm together. The Love in Shadows premiere was a battlefield of light and shadow. Elise stood on the red carpet outside a historic LA theater, her black gown sharp and defiant, Nora at her side in a tailored suit, their hands clasped. The crowd roared, fans waving Elise Inspires signs, protesters shouting slurs from behind barricades. Elise's heart raced, but Nora's steady grip anchored her. "We've got this," Nora whispered, and Elise believed her. Inside, the theater buzzed with anticipation. Mia, the Chicago teen, found Elise before the screening, her eyes wide with awe. "I told my school I'm queer because of you," she said, hugging Elise. Tears stung Elise's eyes as she hugged back, feeling the weight of her choice. This was why she'd spoken her truth. Not for fame, but for moments like this. The screening was electric. Love in Shadows unfolded with raw beauty, Elise and Samira's love story cutting through the audience's defenses. When the credits rolled, the room erupted in applause, some sobbing openly. Lena Torres took the stage, praising Elise's courage, and the crowd cheered louder. Nora, in the front row, beamed, her notebook untouched. She was here as Elise's partner, not a journalist. But the protesters outside grew louder, their chants seeping through the walls. Security tightened, and Elise's team urged her to leave through a back exit. She refused. "I'm not running," she said, her voice firm. Nora nodded, her eyes fierce. Together, they stepped outside, facing the crowd. Fans drowned out the hate with cheers, holding signs, "Love wins." "We see you, Elise." A protester threw a water bottle, missing narrowly, but Elise didn't flinch. She raised her chin, Nora's hand in hers, and the cameras captured it all. The image went viral. Elise and Nora, unyielding, love as their armor. Social media exploded, Love in Shadows trending worldwide. The series debuted to record streams, critics calling it a game changer. The boycott group's influence waned, their protest dwarfed by the outpouring of support. Elise's thriller, Dark Pulse, wrapped filming, and early buzz suggested another hit. Hollywood was listening. Her truth wasn't a liability. It was a revolution. Nora's New York job was thriving, but the distance strained them. They leaned on late-night calls, Nora's voice a lifeline through Elise's long shoot days. Nora flew to LA for weekends, their reunions fierce and tender. One night, over wine in Elise's backyard, Nora admitted, "I want to come back. New York's great, but you're home." Elise's heart leapt, but she hesitated. "You're building something amazing there," she said. Nora smiled. "We're building something better together." They planned a future in LA. Nora pitched a book, a memoir weaving their story with others in queer Hollywood. Publishers bit, and she began writing, her words sharp and soulful. Elise, inspired, started a production company to amplify queer stories, partnering with Lena and Jamie. Their first project, a film based on Mia's story, with the teen as a consultant. "You're giving me a voice," Mia said, and Elise felt her purpose solidify. The industry shifted. Studios that once shunned Elise now courted her, sensing the cultural tide. She signed onto a new drama, playing a queer activist, her role a nod to her own journey. Ryan Blake joined as her co-star, their friendship a quiet strength. Vivian Cross, humbled by the rom-com's failure without Elise, sent a cautious email, "Let's talk." Elise deleted it. She didn't need their approval anymore. Nora's award nomination came through, a testament to her talent. She flew to LA for the ceremony, Elise at her side, their red carpet debut as a couple. The cameras loved them, and for once, the headlines were kind, Elise and Nora, Hollywood's power couple. Nora didn't win, but they celebrated anyway, dancing under the stars at an after-party, their laughter louder than any award. As the premiere's dust settled, Elise and Nora stood on the edge of something new. The world hadn't stopped watching, but they'd stopped caring. Their love, once a secret, was now a beacon imperfect, battle-scarred, but theirs. They were ready for the next chapter together. A year after the Oscars, Elise stood on a quiet beach in Malibu, the horizon ablaze with sunset. Nora was beside her, their bare feet sinking into the sand, their fingers laced. The world hadn't stopped throwing punches, but they'd learned to dodge, to fight, to love harder. Love in Shadows was a cultural touchstone, renewed for a second season. Elise's performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination, her name whispered for another Oscar. The boycott group had faded, their venom no match for the tidal wave of support. Elise Inspires had become a non-profit, funding queer youth programs, with Elise and Mia as ambassadors. At a recent gala, Mia, now 18, spoke alongside Elise, her voice steady. "She showed me I could be seen," Elise had cried, Nora squeezing her hand under the table. Nora's memoir was a bestseller in the making, her publisher fast-tracking its release. She'd moved back to LA, her New York chapter closed but not forgotten. Her journalism thrived, her voice amplifying stories that Hollywood had long ignored. She and Elise bought a house together, a cozy bungalow in Silver Lake, filled with books, vinyl records, and framed photos of their journey. The fundraiser picture hung above their fireplace, a reminder of their defiance. Elise's production company, Truelight, was gaining traction. Their first film, inspired by Mia, was in pre-production with Samira cast as the lead. Elise mentored young queer actors, her set visits a mix of encouragement and tough love. "Tell your truth," she'd say, echoing Nora's words from their first interview. The industry was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but Elise and Nora were at the forefront, their love a catalyst. Dark Pulse premiered to critical acclaim, Elise's detective role earning raves. Ryan Blake, ever her ally, hosted a screening party, toasting her resilience. "You're a legend," he said, and Elise laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. The rom-com studio reached out again, offering a new project with creative freedom. Elise declined politely. She was building her own empire now. The hate hadn't vanished. Trolls still lurked online, and some fans never returned. But the love outweighed it. Letters from queer kids, invitations to speak, allies lifting her up. Elise and Nora became mentors, their home a haven for friends like Lena, Jamie, and Mia. They hosted dinners, laughter spilling into the night, their community a shield against the world's sharp edges. One evening, on their anniversary, Elise took Nora to the Santa Monica Pier, where they'd once stolen a moment of normalcy. The Ferris wheel spun, lights dancing on the water. Elise pulled a small box from her pocket, her hands trembling. "I've spent my life playing roles," she said, her voice thick. "But you're my realest truth. Marry me, Nora." Nora's eyes filled with tears, her laugh bright. "Yes," she said, and they kissed as the crowd cheered, strangers joining their joy. Their wedding was small, intimate, on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Mia read a poem, Ryan officiated, and Lena captured it on film. Elise wore white, Nora in navy, their vows a promise to keep fighting, keep loving. The photos leaked, of course, but this time, The headlines celebrated Elise Harper and Nora Chen tie the knot in stunning ceremony. As they stood on the beach now, a year after everything began, Elise felt whole. The world had tried to break them. Studios, trolls, fear itself. But they'd emerged stronger. Nora rested her head on Elise's shoulder, the waves a soft lullaby. "We changed things," Nora said, her voice quiet but sure. Elise nodded, her heart full. "And we're not done." They walked back to their car, hand in hand, the sunset painting them in gold. Hollywood had tried to define them, but they'd written their own story, one of courage, love, and unbreakable truth. For every kid watching, every heart they'd touched, Elise and Nora knew this was only the beginning.